All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Are the Niners going to make a big splash? Well, Tim Kawakami talked about it. We'll talk about his article that's up at the SF Standard. And then we'll give you our thoughts on what we think the Niners ought to do. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Well, Tim Kawakami in the SF Standard has an article out entitled Trey Hendrickson would be an ideal 49er target. Here is a realistic trade offer. And it's an interesting piece. Everybody knows Hendrickson's a great player. He led the NFL with 17 and a half sacks last year. He's already registered 2 sacks in 3 games this year. He's one of the NFL's better defensive ends. You could make an argument that he's an upgrade from Nick Bosa. So Bosa goes down, torn ACL, season done. Do the Niners do a quick strike solution? And do they call the Bengals, whose season is pretty much gone down the toilet, and try to steal Trey Hendrickson out from underneath them? Tim says the Niners don't want to be rash, but there's some urgency here. They're 3-0. They've done it despite a rash of injuries, and they feel like they're a pretty good football team. Niners are trying to win that 6th Lombardi. They've never been able to get that 6th Lombardi. They've been waiting for almost 30 years for the 6th Lombardi. Now, they acquired Bryce Huff and they acquired Mikael Williams, but those guys were thought to be guys that would go with Nick Bosa, not replace Nick Bosa. And Tim says that the great start, the 3-0 start, adds responsibility to the Niner front office. Shanahan was asked about potential trades, and he said, we'll look at trades like we always do. This is what he said Monday during the conference call. He said, he went on to say, but there's got to be trade options that make sense for you and another team. You can't just do stuff just to do it. So Tim says that the Niners have long been intrigued by Trey Hendrickson. Hendrickson is a pending free agent. The Bengals season is toast. Joe Burrow had his turf toe. He's out until December. You know, they're probably thinking a lot about 2026 right now. Hendrickson's about as good as it gets. He had 17 and a half sacks in each of the last 2 seasons. As I said, he's already had 2 sacks this year and 6 hits on the quarterback. Would the Niners, go from their cost-cutting mode to extreme buy mode overnight and go after Trey Hendrickson? And it's funny. Tim thinks that they may consider on a total about face on their kind of belt tightening and leap right into a Trey Hendrickson trade. Now, he throws out other options, guys that have been here before. Chase Young. They're not acquiring Chase Young. You got to be kidding me. He dogged it in the NFC Championship game to the point where John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and Steve Wilkes all had to address the media about it during Super Bowl week. You think they're bringing back Chase Young? That's not happening. He also throws out Eric Armstead and Leonard Floyd. Armstead's with Jacksonville. Floyd's with Atlanta. Yeah, I could see that. I don't know if either of those guys really move the needle at this point. Armstead's not really a defensive end. Floyd is just a sack guy. He doesn't really give you anything else. He also threw out Kayvon Thibodeau. Thibodeau's 24. He's with the New York Giants. He's a guy who was great at Oregon. Maybe the Niners had a real high grade on him in the draft coming out. Tim goes on to say it would take a special player for the Niners to move draft picks and pay up for a future contract. They've done it before. They did it with Trent Williams in April of 2020. They did it with Christian McCaffrey in 2022. They didn't just trade for both guys. They extended both guys, and both guys are still here. So, they made those guys foundation pieces. Now let's talk more about Hendrickson. He's an awesome player, man. He's 30 years old. He's probably not going to command the massive long-term money that Bosa got and Parsons got because he is a little bit older. And because, of his age and his status as a free agent at the end of the year, he's probably not going to cost multiple first-round picks like Parsons cost Green Bay when they traded him to Dallas. And, Tim talks about a conditional trade. And a conditional trade, the way he's got this penned out, it's almost a no-brainer. I mean, the way his conditional trade works out is that the Niners would offer offer Cincinnati at 2026, next year's first and third round picks, and a second round pick in 2027. And then if Hendrickson plays 60% or more of the Niners' remaining defensive snaps this season, and the 49ers get to the playoffs, and he re-signs with the team, that would be the price that they would pay. Okay, that seems like a pretty high price. But then he says that price would go down to just a first rounder if Hendrickson plays 60% of the snaps and the Niners get to the playoffs, but he doesn't resign. So if he doesn't resign with the 49ers, they would be giving up a first round pick, and that would be it. It seems like a pretty high price to pay. It would be lowered again to just a second rounder if he doesn't play 60% of the snaps, or the Niners don't make the playoffs, and Hendrickson doesn't re-sign. So Tim's, three-pronged, conditional trade basically means that if everything falls apart for the Niners, they'll give up no more than a second-round pick for Trey Hendrickson, which would be a screaming deal for a guy who is this dominant of a player. It'll be interesting. The Niners have this entire offseason has been about a belt tightening and not spending money and really trying to spend as little as possible. But, there's got to be some urgency in the organization to win that sixth Lombardi. They're off to a 3-0 start. It's interesting. His 2025 base salary is $16 million. So that would be a challenge to try to squeeze that in. For the Bengals, it might be a no-brainer. I mean, they would get quality compensation for a player that's probably going to walk at the end of the year, that's probably not going to result in a playoff berth. So, and Tim's like, hey, the worst that can happen is the Niners that they try and whiff and wind up losing a second-round pick. So there's a lot of interesting ideas in this trade proposal that would land the 49ers a player in Trey Hendrickson that you could even argue is even better than Nick Bosa based on his production the last couple of years. All right, so that's what Tim had to say, and it's a pretty interesting piece. I think probably the most interesting revelation when you consider that Tim is pretty connected with the 49ers is that they've liked Trey Hendrickson. In this article, he says Hendrickson, who long has intrigued the 49ers. I've never heard that before. I've never heard that Lynch and Shanahan are long been intrigued by Trey Hendrickson. Now, maybe that's true. I mean, there's no doubt they should be. He had 17 and a half sacks in each of the last two seasons. You show me a player that has 35 sacks over 2 seasons, and I'll show you a football man that likes that player. But Tim went on the record with it and said, hey, look, they're intrigued by this player. They've long been intrigued by this player. So if that is indeed the case, maybe the Niners are getting ready for a major trade that would land them a star player in Trey Hendrickson. Interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. Good article. Read it in the SF Standard. Tim's one of the best. All right, let's take a timeout. Let's have a word here from Brunt. And then on the other side, I'm going to give you my thoughts on what I think could be coming down the pike on the Bosa replacement front. But first, a word from Brunt. Today's video is sponsored by Brunt Workwear, and let me tell you, I was blown away when I pulled these boots out of the box. I've got the Omen soft toe in black right here. I love these boots. I've been wearing them for a few days. They're comfortable, no painful break-in, no sore feet, just tough, durable boots that feel great right away. The story behind Brunt is awesome, too. Their founder, Eric Gerard, grew up blue collar. His friends in the trades told him that the big brands had sold out and stopped listening, so he built Brunt to make gear for real hardworking people. That's why every product is named after the guys he grew up with. The boots are made by and for the trades. Now, whether you need waterproof, safety toe, soft toe, pull on, lace up, Brunt has options that can handle whatever job site you're walking into. And the best part, if they're not right for you, you can wear them and still send them back. That's how much Brunt believes in their product. Right now, for a limited time, you can get $10 off Brunt when you use the code Larry at checkout. Just head to bruntworkwear.com/Larry. Enter the code Larry and you're good to go. After you order, they'll ask you where you heard about Brunt. Do us a favor. Tell them it was from the Krug Show. So don't settle for uncomfortable boots that don't hold up. Brunt built something better. Insanely comfortable, durable work boots for real work. All right, thanks to Brunt for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Now let's talk a little bit more about this Trey Hendrickson trade to the Niners. Now, it's a no-brainer from the standpoint of this is the right guy. You know, the one thing about trading for players, veteran players, is that you could wind up with a Devondre Campbell. You know, you could wind up with a veteran player whose values do not match your values, whose approach doesn't match your approach, who's maybe not as professional as your team is, and it's because he was raised in a different organization. And anytime you go outside your organization for a veteran player, there's always a chance that he's just not going to fit, and he's just not quite made to play on your team. That's what I love about Trey Hendrickson. As far as this guy's got a motor that's undeniable. So he's got production and he's got a crazy motor. He plays incredibly hard. So there's very little risk. There's very little risk in trading for this player. It's not like this player is going to forget how to rush the passer on day one. Nope. It's not like this player is going to not be a dominant player. He is a dominant player. You know what you're getting. And unlike Chase Young, whose motor was, didn't rev hot, Trey Hendrickson plays incredibly hard. So from that standpoint, I think he is. I don't want to do a lot of veteran trades anymore because of you don't know what kind of person you're bringing into your room. But if you have a guy who's got great production and a great motor and is a really hard worker, I don't think you can go wrong. And so I don't think the Niners could go wrong trading for Trey Hendrickson unless they traded multiple number ones to get him. Some kind of a conditional trade, as Tim throws out there, I think would be absolutely fantastic. But then there's also the timing. And that's where I think I would go in a different direction than the direction Tim is going in. And when I talk about the timing, what I'm talking about is, it's week 3 going into week 4. It's late September. You still have the rest of September, all of October, all of November, all of December, and then the playoffs start in January. So, there's a long way to go. And to trade a lot of assets for one player, that player could get hurt in 3 weeks, and now you're down the assets and the player, and you're maybe not a Super Bowl contender. So I think you got to be real circumspect about going all in on one player. Depth rules the day in pro football for the most part. Special players are great, and they can definitely mean the difference between winning a championship and not. And Hendrickson is that kind of a player. I get it. But he's one guy. And in this scenario, he's one guy who makes a lot of money. So it kind of is going to handicap your ability to do anything else at the trade deadline, which is still not until, the first day of November. That's still a ways off. So I don't know that the all in for one 30-year-old is really the plan that a team that's already, the Niners are already really, really top heavy with a very young bottom core, so they have a really young rookie class that's very deep. And then they're very, very top heavy at the top of their roster with stars. So do you want to lean into that and become even more top heavy, carving out another huge amount of draft capital and cap space for one more star player? I think that might be a little too rich for their blood, considering where they are right now as an organization. Okay, what are other options out there? I think the 2-for-1 option is something that they really ought to consider. And there's 3 teams out there that can give you the 2-for-1. The New York Giants have Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns. The Saints have Carl Granderson and Cam Jordan. Heck, Cincinnati has Joe Asai and Trey Hendrickson. Houston has Derek Barnett and Darrell Taylor. All these teams have, Miami has Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Some of these teams have multiple guys that can help you. The team that I think makes the most sense is the team that the 49ers have been picking off players from all summer, and that's the New York Jets. Robert Saleh drafted Will McDonald. Will McDonald is a speed rusher of note who's right in the prime of his career. And Robert Saleh probably also drafted Michael Clemens, the Texas A&M defensive end. And the Jets are going nowhere. The Jets are in a rebuild. The Jets are a bad team. They're going to lose a lot of games. I think that's the duo I'd try to get. Will McDonald is a speed rusher. Clemens is a power rusher. Adding two guys in the prime of their career, I think makes sense. Both those guys are probably on their rookie contracts. They're not making big money. So you don't have a big financial, there's a big financial expenditure if you acquire Trey Hendrickson. There's a big financial expenditure probably if you acquire Cam Jordan or Brian Burns. Those guys, or even Jalen Phillips, Trayvon Walker. There's a financial element to this thing. Will McDonald and Michael Clemens are low cost in their prime alternatives on a Jets team that's not going anywhere. And if you could get that duo for a third round draft choice or a fourth round draft choice or some combination of mid round picks and conditional picks in 27, that's the duo that I would go for. Will McDonald, the fourth, and Michael Clemens. Clemens is 6'4", 270. He's a big-bodied guy who's really good against the run. A good edge setter in the run game, and another big-bodied guy with some experience coming off the edge. Will McDonald, I think, in a lot of ways, is a younger version of Bryce Huff. He's a smallish, unbelievable get-off, unbelievable speed. And the reason I would want Will McDonald is because look what the Niners have been able to do in the first 3 weeks of the year. Bosa's getting off the ball. There's no doubt Bryce Huff's getting off the ball. The speed that they have at the defensive end spots are making those tackles flare out. And it's also creating a lot of inside room for Gross Matos and Mikael Williams. I really like that duo inside, especially if you can have speed rushers that spread out the opposition's offensive line, because then it's Mikael in space against the guard. It's Gross Matos in space against the guard. And those guys win in those scenarios. Plus, I also like the 2-for-1. Nick Bosa is such a force, such a monster. I don't know that there's one guy out there. I mean, Hendrickson would be the one guy that could replace him. But if you're not going to get a Hendrickson, I think it might be better to just have two guys. Will McDonald and Michael Clemens, neither is Nick Bosa, but McDonald will give you the speed rush. Clemens will give you the great run defense, and having two more guys off the edge, I think would give you some more teeth to your defense. So that I would diversify. I know it's easy to go, go with the big name guy, and the big name guy is definitely going to be sexy and the fans are going to love it and it will make splashes. And God knows the Niners they have some of the NFL's best players because they have this star-like mentality. But I think they're a little too top-heavy with stars. And what this would do, it would give them two core defensive ends that aren't necessarily stars right now, but they're ascending football players that are in the prime of their career, that are low cost, probably going to stay healthy. I like that idea. I think that if this was week 8 or 9, and you're just looking to turn for home and play a few games, get to the playoffs, yeah, give me Trey Hendrickson all day. Give me that difference-making one difference maker. But because it's week 3 going into week 4, I think I would go with the volume. I think I would go with, numbers. If I can get Michael Clemens and Will McDonald the fourth for a mid-round pick or some combination of mid-round picks, I think that's the route I would go. It wouldn't get the headlines. It wouldn't get the fans jumping up and down, but I think it's the better move for the 49ers long-term. It gives them 2 instead of 1. It gives them both a speed guy and a run defender, edge setter. And it gives them, 2 guys that they can lean on with the game on the line to put some heat on the opposing quarterback. And I think there's a very good chance that Will McDonald and the fourth and Michael Clemens, if put in this defense with Robert Saleh and Chris Kasarik, might really, really flourish. Might really find a level that they've never found before, and this could be an overwhelmingly great deal for the 49ers. So there's my thought. There's a bunch of teams out there that have two edge rushers. Once again, Saints have Carl Granderson and Cam Jordan. Giants have Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. Miami's got Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Cincinnati's got Trey Hendrickson and Joseph Osai. Houston's got Derek Barnett and Darrell Taylor. But I would go with the Jets. Will McDonald IV and Michael Clemens, I think, would be the duo that I would be knocking on the Jets' door and seeing if I could get those guys in some form of a trade. All right, those are my thoughts. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Brunt for sponsoring this video. Thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.